Hello, welcome to another episode of Movies, They're Pretty Good. I'm your host, Travis Dudding, and to continue my series on the films of David Lynch, without further ado, let's get right into the second film, Elephant Man, or The Elephant Man, sorry. This one made in, let's see, 1980. Okay, I thought so. We got the Criterion Blu-ray right here, and actually I also own this on a very beat up Laserdisc that I got off of eBay that I recently realized is completely unplayable due to the extensive amount of disc rot. I don't know if you can see, it is not supposed to be that like gold color. I don't know how much of the, yeah, you can see all the like the little spots and stuff. Yeah, definitely not supposed to look like that. But that's okay because it's got a cool cover. Get a record frame and put it on the wall when I have more wall space. I don't really have that right now. But yeah, great film. Honestly, probably one of his more, let me say, mainstream films. More straight, normal movie, especially compared to Eraserhead. Probably the one that just destroys me emotionally the most out of all of them. Now, granted, I'll cry at a couple of the other ones. Probably a few times during Twin Peaks, especially the more I watch it, and then definitely in the Straight Story. That's another one that gets me usually. But yeah, this one is just incredible. It's so beautiful. It was shot in black and white. Produced by Mel Brooks, of all people, usually known for comedy films, but his wife got a hold of the script at some point and said, hey, you got to do this, and he had already been starting up a production company for more non-comedy stuff called Brooks Films, and he's like, yeah, this is a perfect one right here. I think it was it was producer Stuart Cornfield that kind of brought it to their attention. And then he told Mel, I was like, hey, I got the perfect guy to direct this. This guy, David Lynch. And he had previously been talking to David Lynch just about another screenplay that he was working on that was supposed to be the follow-up to Eraserhead. It was called Ronnie Rocket. Literally, like, throughout David Lynch's career, it's always like, this is my next one, Ronnie Rocket, and it just never happened. I think there's probably elements of it that turn up in some of his other stuff, but yeah, definitely never saw anything of Ronnie Rocket. But so yeah, they had been talking about producing this script, but then no one was really wanting to work on that one. None of the studios or anything like that. So, but then he was just like, all right, well, I just need to do something that's already written. And then asked Stuart Cornfield, like, hey, like, what do you got? And he was going to list off like 4 different screenplays, and he started with The Elephant Man, and David Lynch was like, lights, alarms going off in his head. He's like, yo, no, that's the one. That right there. That just that name alone. I don't even got to know what it's about. The Elephant Man, like that. He was just so intrigued by that title, and he was on board immediately. So they get it to Mel, and Stewart's like, hey, like, I got this guy that I think should do it. He's only done one other movie, this movie called Eraserhead. And he's like, all right, well, I got to see this first, just to see what kind of director this is. And at this point, David Lynch thinks, he's like, oh yeah, this isn't happening. It was fun while it lasted, but this movie ain't happening now. But Mel watched Eraserhead, loved it, like, gave David Lynch a big hug, is like, you madman, I love you, kind of paraphrasing, but that's pretty much how it went. So then at this point, the 3 of them kind of keep working on the script, kind of just doing more passes over it. They're like, yeah, it's a good script, but, kind of wanted to put kind of his own self into there and stuff like that, obviously, And initially, David wanted to do the makeup for it, and quickly realized that no, that's just not going to happen. This is kind of a closer to a studio film, and you kind of got more of a time constraint. You can't be spending 5 years on it like you were with Eraserhead, and having complete control over it. There's other people involved, obviously. And then he said that, he was working on some ideas and stuff, and it just wasn't happening. Like, none of it was, like, turning out the way he wanted. And he was just like, no, like, this, Mel's going to be mad at me, and, like, I'm going to get kicked off the project, or it's going to completely fail and everything. And then just, I was like, no, one day he just had this like epiphany. It's like, no, I can do the movie, but I can't do this part of it. Someone else has to do this. I forget who they got to do the makeup for it, but man, that's like one of the key things that carries this film. And actually, it got nominated for like 8 Oscars, but this was prior to them having a makeup and hairstyling category. So, and a lot of people say that it was kind of the one that they had been wanting to have that category before this, but this was the one that's like, man, like, that should have got that, that should exist so this movie could win it, basically. Eventually we got that. It didn't win any of the 8 Oscars, obviously, but yeah, just incredible film. The makeup is amazing. Like, John Hurt is unrecognizable, and that's kind of the point. But yeah, they start casting it. Initially, David wanted Jack Nance to play the Elephant Man just because he had a good working relationship with him from Eraserhead, but ultimately they wanted like a full British cast, just to keep it authentic as much as possible. And then just I think it was Mel, someone suggested, it's like, hey, you need someone that you can tell what to do, kind of, that you don't have this like previous dynamic with, that type of thing. And I think like to also just be challenged too, because he's not going to just be him and Jack Nance making movies forever. Yeah, he's shows up in a lot of them, but yeah, they get a full British cast. Like I said, John Hurt is the main, or is the Elephant Man, and then Anthony Hopkins is the doctor that kind of takes him under his wing and starts taking care of him and stuff. And initially just wants to study him. He's just like fascinated with them, because ultimately he movie opens with, first movie opens with like a title sequence where there's like elephants, and then there's like a woman kind of superimposed over each other, and just like dark sky and music and stuff. Later kind of learned that that's supposed to be the mom of the Elephant Man, and that it was believed that what caused his impairments was that she was kind of attacked by an elephant, or like not trampled, but had an encounter with an elephant while she was pregnant. Ultimately, scientifically, it was kind of, no, that's not what happened, but it's likely that did happen, like that incident happened, but that's not what caused his problems and everything. Because this is based on a true story. I don't think I said that at the beginning. Which, when you're dealing with, I feel like when it's a true story, the things that get the two genres that get accentuated the most by being a true story are anything sad and anything scary. And it's like, this horrible thing like actually happened, or this like devastating thing like actually happened in real life. It just kind of just adds an extra layer to it. Ultimately, it's still a movie that is a fictionalized version of it, and there's probably stuff that is a little different. Like, we know that the character's name is John Merrick, the Elephant Man, John Merrick. But it's been proven at this point, like by that's on record that his name was Joseph Merrick. But yeah, so after the opening sequence, we see Anthony Hopkins like kind of wandering through like a carnival in town. I'm assuming somewhere in London. Kind of sees the sideshow area and kind of wants to go in and check that out. Eventually does see John Merrick. Sees the Elephant Man exhibit and everything, and he's just fascinated by this. The carnival gets shut. Oh, at least the sideshow gets shut down by the police. I guess kind of at the time, these kind of like freak shows, and freak shows is what they were called, but obviously that's not the correct term to use now. But these things would get were kind of going out of fashion at the time, and so they got shut down by the police. But Treves, Anthony Hopkins' character, is just fascinated. Ultimately gets finds out where he's staying, and goes and meets him, talks to his owner, which is pretty much the dynamic of what it is. Obviously you can't, this is post-slavery, not that ever should have counted, but that's just like the dynamic that they had, was that he was like, this guy is my property because I make money off of him, and he's mistreating him, he's beating him and all this stuff. It's just super terrible, obviously. But Anthony Hopkins is like, hey, let me like bring him by or send him to the hospital. I want to do a few tests and study him and stuff like that. Ultimately, like, just assumes that he's completely like mentally gone. He's just a guy. He calls him an imbecile. Is like, I hope to God that he's an imbecile. That he basically just living and walking, but like can't communicate, can't brain doesn't function past a certain age, stuff like that. And these are all just assumptions that he makes. At some point, the kid that is with Bites, which is the carnival guy that is like his caretaker, not that he's taking care, but there's a kid that's with them, and he comes and gets the doctor because Bites just went off on John when he got back from the hospital and was just beating him for no reason and stuff. And the kid goes and gets the doctor, says like, he's not breathing properly and stuff. And so Anthony Hopkins shows up and he's like, what'd you do to him? And Bites is like, oh, I don't know, he fell, bullshit. And he's like, well, can't you treat him here? And he's like, no, like, he needs a hospital, you fucking idiot. And convinces him like, yeah, he's got to go to the hospital because he could die. If he's your livelihood and he's got to be fine, then maybe you shouldn't have fucking beat him, and I got to go take him to the hospital. So it's at this point that he's basically going to start staying there for most of the film at this point. But he gets him in there, and he's kind of trying to get him to communicate and stuff, and he's just like not really. He's moving very slow. And at a certain point, and then like the nurses are freaking out about him because he's just so extremely deformed and everything, and they just never seen anything like that. The head guy at the hospital is like, you got to be doing so, what's going on here, like, because if he's incurable, we're not a place for incurables. What are you doing, basically. And he's like, well, obviously I can't cure him, but I can, work with him and kind of improve his communication, that type of stuff. He's just like, yeah, this is going to be my project, and like I want your support on me being able to do that. And so Treves starts coaching John and trying to get him to communicate more, like say, my name is John Merrick, and kind of enunciate more, because part of his deformity makes it to where he's like barely understandable. I think in the movie he's more understandable than he was in real life, but still very like you got to concentrate to like really hear what he's saying and everything. But he's like coaches him to like say these phrases and stuff, so then he can show off to the doctor like, hey, look at all the progress I made. And doctor like sees right through it. He's like, yeah, like how long was he coaching you on this? Like how long did you guys practice this? And so he's like kind of like, all right, whatever, I've seen enough. You didn't really do anything. I'm not impressed. That don't impress me much. He went full Shania Twain. And so he's about to leave, but then John starts reciting, I forget which psalm it is, but one of the psalms from the Bible, and he starts reciting it, and Treves looks at the other guy, says like, hey, I didn't teach him that part. So they go back in, and then he's kind of like, okay, so there's something here, and there's obviously way more to this guy than any of us thought. John admits like, hey, like I was just scared, of living with this guy, bites, and he's beat me all the time. Like obviously, like I'm very not trustworthy towards people. But so then once he starts like actually making progress and stuff, and he finds out that he's like, hey, this guy's like actually like super smart, and just it's just his outward appearance that's off. And so he kind of starts becoming famous, and there's all these like socialites and stuff coming to visit him. There's a stage actress played by Anne Bancroft that comes, and she's one of the ones that's like actually nice to him and like genuinely kind, because one of the head nurses points out, it's like, hey, like these guys are just they're just here so they can brag about it to their friends. They still they're not even trying to hide the fact that they're disgusted with them when they look at him and all this stuff. But, Treves is like, hey, like that, don't be so hard on them. It's good for him, and, probably is, but, you kind of see where both of them are coming from. And then, but one of the bummers is that one of the night security guys or whatever, it starts coming in the middle of the night during the night shift, and he starts messing with John and kind of borderline abusing him. But then he starts going down to the pub and he's recruiting all these people. It's like, hey, Elephant Man's over here, I know how to get him, and if you want to see him, you got to pay, So he's basically like charging people admission so he can go sneak people into where John is sleeping, and they can go fuck with them, basically. And it's very upsetting scene, obviously, and, very heightened, the amount of like, depravity and everything like that. And, not that don't think that anyone's actually capable of that. Obviously, like people suck, so obviously they're going to be able to do that in real life. So this is kind of going on like behind the scenes and stuff, and John's too afraid to like speak up that this is happening. At a certain point, they're kind of have like a board of directors meeting at the hospital, and there's one guy that's just like, what are we doing wasting money on this guy? Like, why does he get a room and all this stuff? And just, talking all this shit. Like, we gotta like send him back to the street. There's nothing we can do for him. Right about that time, it's when I forget if it was, I think it's one of the princesses, like someone either royalty or connected to the royal family comes in, because it is like true that one of the princesses was like a frequent visitor of his. But yeah, so she comes and is like, hey, like, we love that this guy's here. We love that you're taking care of him. We're gonna pay for his room and stuff, and signed, Queen. I don't remember which queen it was. I should probably learn my British history, but whatever. But yeah, so basically they got like a royal decree that, hey, this guy's good to go. Keep him here. We're paying his rent, and they kind of pretty much shuts up the other guy, and then they vote like, all right, so are we going to keep him or not? And then it's, it turns out to be unanimous because this guy doesn't want to, act like he was trying to talk them all out of it 5 minutes ago in front of the royalty. So yeah, they go and tell John like, hey, you're a permanent resident here. Yeah, this is now your home, and he's very moved by this, obviously, and he's super happy. They give him a gift, and it's this like dressing case, just all these like brushes and combs and everything, just that way he could just feel good about himself, self-care and all that. But then that night, here comes that stupid security guy bringing in a bunch of people, and guess who joins him this time? It's Bites, and he wants his property back, in his words, and they abuse him and stuff, and then leave him, and then basically he's like they gets knocked over on his back, which he's not supposed to. He can't lay down, like, because of the like massive size of his head. It basically would asphyxiate him, so he can't sleep laying down. In the movie, he's propped up, but I think from what I saw in real life, he had to sleep like with his head on his knees, kind of just crouched forward like that. But so at some point in all the chaos, he gets knocked on his back. He's not breathing right, but the security guy like brings him up, like pulls him back up, and is like, we're just having fun, man. And then then gives him a couple coins, and is like, here, you get a portion. Basically gives him a tip off of all the money he's making off of this guy, and he leaves, and John's just sitting there. But then in comes Bites. He was kind of hanging back a little bit, and he comes in and starts talking to him. Scene cuts. His room's all trashed, and he's gone. They come in to like, take care of him and everything, and he's gone. They're freaking out. One of the other security guys saw what happened and tells Treves like, hey, this is what happened. I know who did it, and all this. Treves goes and finds the guy. Starts throwing him against the wall and stuff, and he's like, you have no authority over me. You can't fire me. Only Mrs. Mothershead can fire me. And then here she comes, and she's like, yeah, hits him over the head, and basically he's fired. But he doesn't know where he went, because when he left him, he was fine. He was there, and he was in bed. Fine is relative, but yeah, he has no idea. Treves can put it together. It's Bites. He came back because he can't find Bites anywhere either. They left the country, and I think they went over to Belgium, I think is what if I remember right. But yeah, he's trying to get the gang back together and make them a sideshow attraction again. People in Belgium aren't really having it, and John's not having it. He's depressed. He's not doing any of the stuff he would before. He's not performing or anything. Not that he really did much other than just be out there. But the fact that no one else wants anything to do with this, Bites is taking it out on John, because that's just an evil guy, so that's what he's going to do. Throws him in a cage with like the baboons or something. Now they're separated, but still, just like throws him in an animal cage and is just calling him an animal and stuff. And then Bites is just getting drunk and eventually passes out. The other sideshow performers are clocking this, and they're like, yeah, we gotta bust this guy out. And so they let him out of the cage and everything, get them all set up to like travel, and like, hey, take this, you can wear the mask, like, kind of like a burlap thing with a hole so he could see, so that way people don't really see what's going on and it's not freaking out the general public. Get him on a boat back over to England and everything. One of the guys, which they'll have the little person in the sideshow, even though they're just there's a little person. It's insane the way what they thought people were freaks back then. But the little person is Kenny Baker, who plays R2D2. Well, he's the guy in R2D2 in Star Wars. But yeah, it's cool to see him. I recognize him immediately. But yeah, they get him on a boat, send him back to England. He gets there. He's at the he has an incident at the train station where some little shit is bugging him and is like, "Hey, mister, why's your head so big?" And, poking him with a stick and stuff. He's getting all flustered with this going on, accidentally knocks some little girl over. Everyone starts freaking out, like blowing this way out of proportion. And people start chasing him. They eventually chase him into like the men's bathroom with like where all the urinals are, which I didn't know urinals were been around that long. So I was kind of like, oh, cool, learn something new. But yeah, they chase him in there, and then he finally snaps. Like, this is like you see him get emotional, but this is the first time that like he loses control of his emotions, and he's just like starts yelling because they're crowding around him and they corner him, and he's like, "I am not an animal. I am a human being." And then everyone kind of realized like, "Oh fuck, what the fuck are we doing?" Like. what the hell's wrong with us? Cops show up. He had like a card for well, I think just at the time they're like, oh yeah, this is the Elephant Man, like we gotta take him to the hospital where he's been at. But I think when this actually happened in real life, he had the contact information for Treves, and so that's how they knew where to take him and everything. They get him back there. He gets like resettled in and everything, and then we cut to like a little later, and we see some of the staff like getting dressed up, and then John's getting dressed up, and but the two nurses that are talking about the actress that he's friends with, played by Anne Bancroft, and she says, does she know that John's dying? And she says yes. Like, she knows. So this is when we find out that John's dying. And this is when we know that it's about to get super emotional now. So we see John and Treves, and they're getting him ready. Carriage arrives, and they go to the theater. And this is John's first time going to the theater. And they put him up in the box and everything, and he's got the private box, and he's watching the show. She comes out beforehand and says like, hey, this is dedicated to John Merrick, very close friend of mine. And then they're watching the show, and he's just amazed. He's never seen anything like this before. They kind of do it in like a montage way of where it's not, it kind of just gives you the feeling of like the wonderment of what this would be like for someone who's experiencing it for the first time. It's not necessarily like here's a play, this is what it looks like. It's kind of more just the feeling you would get, which, that's David Lynch all the way. Play finishes. She comes out, and this was kind of just starts talking about him again, and says like, and unless this might be at the beginning of it. Yeah, I might have that a little mixed up. She might just talk at the beginning, and then you see the montage, and then it cuts to later. But either way, so what she does is says, like, this is dedicated to a very close friend of mine. He loves the theater, but this is his first time ever getting to go. And then, says, John Merrick, like, my dear friend. Everyone applauds. He gets a standing ovation, and he's standing in the box and everything. And, that's, the tears are starting at this point. Then afterwards, back in his room, and he's talking to Treves, and just like, oh man, this was so good. This was amazing. Such a good night. And Treves is like, yeah, like, maybe we can go again. And John's like, oh man, that'd be so wonderful. So then they say goodnight to each other. John goes back to doing his, he's been building a model of a cathedral throughout the movie. He gets to a certain point and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, like it's finished finally. So he gets up and then he's looking at there's a painting on the wall of someone just sleeping in a bed, regular laying down, sleeping, normal sleeping. And he had said earlier, like, I wish I could sleep like, normal people do. But we know that that's going to kill him if he does. And, we heard earlier that he is dying. They don't really go into specifics about what it is. Was it just from, like, trauma from when he got kidnapped? We don't know. But he knows, and we know. So he's, taking in that picture, and then he just starts going to the bed, and he's pulling the pillows off, all the pillows that usually, like, keep him propped up. And, he just he knows it's done, so he just goes to sleep like regular people do. Just lays down, and then, that's it. And we know that he passes away, and man, it's so sad and so well done. And just, the emotions well up. I'd heard in one of the things saying that, like, it's basically like he wants to sleep like normal people do. And this was the first time that he felt like a normal person. He got to go out, he got to go to the play. No one treated him differently other than just like, hey, this is my friend, and stuff like that. That's normal, for someone. That could happen to a normal person. Yeah, he was made the center of attention at a certain point, but he was still treated like a normal human being. And so I think it was, he knew he was dying. So at that point it was just mission accomplished. And so now I'm gonna, fulfill my dream, go to sleep like a normal person. And then he just doesn't wake up. Which I think in real life, I wasn't so, like, meditated. Like, they think what happened is that, because he was normal in the morning, and then sometime in the afternoon they went in and he was, just gone already. So they think what happened was that he had a heart attack or stroke, and fell back and couldn't get back up. And, that's just how it happened. But yeah, just incredible movie. Just really, really hits you. Really hard to talk about it too without just like breaking down crying too. So that's why I had to take it slow. But yeah, I just love that movie so much. The makeup was incredible, obviously. I know I didn't talk too much about that. But, it took them like 8 hours to put on the makeup every day. And then they would shoot for 10, and it would take like an hour and a half to take it off, but John Hurt said that they would take breaks, it was every other day. So it wasn't just like every single day he was spending all that time, so he would have time in between, and everything. But a funny story about the makeup. So in an interview, John Hurt was talking about, if he was asked if he kept anything from the set, and he actually did keep the the cranium piece for John Merrick's head, and just had it in some bookcase or closet or something like that at one of his houses. So he was I think in the process of moving, or he had just got another place somewhere else, and someone, he had a caretaker taking care of his house while he was gone, and someone broke in. There was a break-in while he was gone, and he's like, oh my gosh, just wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And then I was then asked about his stuff, and it's just well, yeah, they didn't take anything, because what happened was they went into the place where he was keeping the head, and the head fell out, and they left and broke the door on trying to get out of there. So basically they went to steal something. Giant elephant man head pops out, scares the shit out of them, and then they break the door trying to leave, because they knew that that's what happened, because it was, there was evidence of a break-in. Elephant man head is on the floor, and there's a broken door from when they're trying to leave or whatever. So I thought that was a funny story, worth sharing. And but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about this movie. Kind of just been scrolling through IMDb trivia, which is kind of the worst place to look for anything worthwhile. But yeah, I think that's enough for that movie. Really enjoy this one. I probably don't watch it as much as some of the other ones, just because it is so heavy emotionally, but it is well done. It's an incredible movie. Like I said, way more normal, Oscar baity type stuff compared to David Lynch's other stuff. But it's not his only mainstream one. He had A Straight Story, and I guess Blue Velvet's pretty close to mainstream. It's a little darker and has a little bit of the elements of the weird, but I'd say it's fairly normal compared to some of the later stuff, But just amazing movie. Love it so much. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you guys for watching or listening. If you're listening to this and want to watch it, it's on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube and don't want to look at me anymore and just want to hear it, it's on all the other podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that shit. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. And next week, I'll be hitting you with my least favorite David Lynch movie, Dune. So stick around for that, and have a good week. Thanks. Bye.